Welcome to the Be Here Now Guest Podcast. This series features a collection of teachings and conversations centered around mindfulness, spiritual growth, and living a life in balance. Each week, our diverse network of guest teachers and hosts offer up wisdom and practices from a different spiritual path and perspective. If you would like to support this podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/donate.
So tonight we mark the beginning of our journey, and we're exploring how to cultivate inner peace and resilience in the face of our life's challenges. And if you don't know me, I'm Jackie Dobrinska, and I'll be the host for most of this course, though there are a few evenings where KP Evans will be your fearless guide. He's a wonderful human and one of Ram Dass's caretakers. And over the next 10 days, we're really diving deep into these teachings, both from our beloved Ram Dass, as well as many of his friends. And there are all these wonderful pieces of how to navigate the stormy ups and downs of our lives. And many of you probably don't know, but I live in Asheville, North Carolina. And if you've watched the news, especially in this country, we just went through a literal storm, Hurricane Helene. And, you know, like many disasters like this, we'll be navigating the aftermath for months, if not years. And in those first few weeks, it was the key concepts of this course that kept echoing in my head, that kept giving me ground, that kept bringing me back and guiding me through these choppy waters. And so given our current climate, given all of the things that are happening personally and collectively, I think that you're going to find a lot to gain from each and every part of this course. So with that, I'm going to jump into the logistics for a second. So maybe you already know this, but I want to remind you that each morning you'll get an email and there'll be about 20 minutes of recording of lectures from Ram Dass and friends. And then each weekday evening, we'll be meeting on this same Zoom link at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And these evenings will be about an hour long. They'll include a Dharma talk from our guest teacher, usually some sort of practice, and then a live Q&A. And so as we move into the Q&A section, which I'll remind you of later, you can ask a question by raising your virtual hand, which you can find in the reactions at the bottom of your screen, or you can type a question into the chat. Brittany, who's here, she's on the back end, and she's going to be collecting the questions, and then I can read them for you. So I'd also want to note that these are being recorded, and you will have access to this video for 48 hours after the session, and that allows you to sort of go at your own pace. And then afterwards, if you haven't already been on the discussion page to discuss concepts of either the morning lectures or these evening group sessions, there's a lovely community chat where you can go. That link is in each of your emails each day. And many of you will find that you're going to want to go a little bit deeper. And so if you want to go deeper, there's an hour and a half more of content that includes Ram Dass and Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and Omid Safid. And you'll have access to that, as well as you'll get to keep all of these recordings indefinitely. And then you also get access to hundreds of hours of other courses. So that link is also in each of your daily emails. It's ramdass.org/courses. And when you sign up for the Inner Academy, it really helps us because this course is free. And we can only afford to do that because people donate and because they sign up for the Academy. So consider doing one or both. And lastly, we want to invite you to have friends join you. It's a wonderful opportunity to reflect and learn and just support one another and deepen. Okay, so that's the logistics. Hope that sounds good to everyone. And now we get to dive into our content. So the theme of today, if you've looked at the material, is on suffering and compassion. And to help us dig into this a little deeper, we are joined by the lovely Ajahn Thanissara, and she brings a profound understanding of the human condition. She has trained as a Buddhist nun in the forest school of Ajahn Chah and is the co-founder of Dhamagiri Sacred Mountain Retreat in South Africa. And she's dedicated her life to awakening hearts and minds to the path of compassion and wisdom and service. And she has this rare gift of being able to hold space for both the difficult and the tender, and showing us how the path of suffering can lead us to deeper understandings of interconnectedness. And so we are so glad you are here. Welcome, Thanissara.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm really thrilled to be here and to meet everyone in this format and to really be reminded of an extraordinary guide, cosmonaut for many of us back in the day when we were trying to make sense of shifts of consciousness, rapid shifts of consciousness and integration, and what does it all mean? So, and of course, the connection all through Maharaji and Nkoli Baba, which has been very profound influence in my life. So, yeah, and at this moment, here we are, really mind-numbingly challenging on all fronts. So I'd like to just reflect a little bit about what I'm thinking around or contemplating in this time, but let's just begin with...
Before we go into that, we have a special guest that I want to let people know about and just jump into that for a couple minutes before we jump into the content.
Sure.
Okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a surprise guest before we jump in, and it's Raghu Markus, who is the director of Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. And so he wanted to take a moment just to talk a little bit about why we wanted to offer this course. So Raghu, why don't you jump in, and then we'll head back to Thanissara.
Sorry, Thanissara. I'd actually just rather hang with you, and spend an hour. I met Thanissara quite a number of years ago, and she is very special in that her deep connection to Buddhist discriminating wisdom, which is really part of our legacy from Neem Karoli Baba, from Maharaji, is matched by her open-heartedness and connection to Maharaji. So I'm really happy she's here, help start this off. I just wanted to say that, it's the times that we are going through, as Thanissara just obviously alluded to, which are extremely difficult in many different aspects of our lives. And this course is about, that's why we address, hey, we should do something, because Ram Dass's perspective in particular is so extraordinarily helpful, as Jackie just said, in terms of how it got her through this tragedy in Asheville. And it made me think back to first meeting Ram Dass. And that perspective completely turned me around, as it has, I think, most of the people who are on this call right now, on this Zoom. That perspective allowed for the 100 horrible visions and the 100,000, the Buddhists would say, horrible visions, and the 100,000 beautiful ones. And so I thought, wow, this is something we need to share. And fortunately, we have great people like Jackie and Noah who really put together material. And the other beautiful part of this, like Thanissara, we have other teachers that really have been connected with Ram Dass over their many, many years, and in some cases, decades. So the level of trust that we experience, me personally, knowing Ram Dass for a very, very long time, that is invaluable. To have that kind of trust that really allows us to deepen into our intuitive nature. And I think that's really goes a long way to helping get through these kind of times. So that's it. That's all I have to say. I mean, I think we all know this. And, that's the beauty of a collective mind that can have the right perspective and not have us as caught as we can be in the polarization and division that's going on. So, Thanissara, I leave it to you. And thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Raghu. So, dear friends, let's just take a few slower, deeper breaths and let ourselves arrive together here, perhaps feeling the ground beneath you, connecting with this deep spirit and presence of earth, of Pachamama, of Gaia, our body made of the elements of earth, of the air, waters, of fire, space, essence of consciousness. And encouraging, maybe, if it's supportive, just to take 3 to 5 slower, deeper breaths. Just to help recalibrate your nervous system a little bit, to slow down, steady the mind on the slower rhythm of the body. Soft, gentle inhalation, suffusing the breath energy through the body. And on the exhalation, just letting parts of where we're holding in the body, shoulders and through the torso, etc., softening the belly. And letting whatever doesn't serve us in this moment, just handing it back to the Dharma, to nature, to earth. And as we start this series, this really important time that we're in, really challenging time, knowing that it requires us to really go deeply to explore a deeper refuge than the turbulence and uncertainty, this already present heart, aware, timeless, deathless, illuminating this moment. Just calling in and invoking in whatever forms and whatever way makes sense to us, a force of compassion, of deep love, of presence, of healing. And allowing that to be with the breath suffused through our whole body, our being, this whole space we're in. And maybe on an exhalation, extending that as a frequency into all time and space with a prayer that may all beings at this time be touched by compassion. May all hearts be awakened, healed, all suffering transformed, all protections be present. We call on all the protective forces, all the great beings, all the streams of awakening to be present, to suffuse this world with great compassion and mercy, to support and uplift all beings, that we may walk a good path together. Thank you, dear friends. So, this focus of suffering into compassion, or the nexus and relationship of suffering and compassion, the entwined way that both of these two sides of the same coin, is really just a very succinct way of summarizing the whole path, I think, of awakening. This movement, cyclic movement through the experience that we all share together, of feeling the feeling of uncertainty, of stress, of pain, of grief, of dread, of overwhelm, and then the very deep existential sufferings. And also having been touched by compassion, knowing compassion, feeling compassion, that we have this potential innate and we can cultivate this. And particularly at this moment, we've tended often to look at this journey as individuals, our own spiritual awakening journey. But I would like to reflect a little bit in this session on translating this movement of suffering to compassion on a collective level, so that we've all worked hard to individuate. I think it's a part of our evolutionary journey, but there's a certain way that we can become divorced through that process, and we've become divided and separated out into our silos, where we become disassociated, disconnected from ourselves as a deeper collective, where in reality all beings are always present in one seamless, boundless awareness and consciousness. There's no real ultimate boundary. So the curriculum really of this moment speaks to this in these times, where we're beginning to understand in very real ways that our liberation is deeply bound up with the liberation of all beings. And in that way, there's a part of that curriculum perhaps is a shift, as we're shifting from the myths of our civilization, of our modernity, which have shaped the understanding of ourself and this world. One of them being this rampant individualism, to the point where the sense of other or nature or earth doesn't factor in or doesn't count in our human realm that much, other than what ways it can service us. This sense of us first, our people first over everyone else, these hierarchies of worth, the sense of endless growth, which is, as we know, has been devastating, plundering precious resources of this limited earth, this beautiful, magnificent, exquisite home. So all of these myths have brought us to this point that we're in now, where, particularly overshadowed and fueled by a mind that's rooted in not really understanding its deep own nature. And so acting out from fear, from grasping and not really living and understanding our interconnectedness, has led us to this moment of what I would just encapsulate as a time of genocide, ecocide and extinction, which we really, in many ways, are completely, for the most part, unprepared for. And so it's a very fast-moving curriculum, and there's a certain way around the experience of suffering that, in the understanding of the wheel of origination, which was connected with the Buddha's insight, the third knowledge of his awakening, where he tracked what is the source of suffering, but in that process, understanding that actually suffering, what we use this word suffering, is also a catalyst for liberation. And there's a certain way of understanding in the spiritual path that the deeper the suffering, the more potential there can be for quantum shifts of consciousness. So I think just to hold that in mind as we plunge into a sort of a free fall, a planetary free fall that we're now in, which is generating a lot of extreme overwhelm and fear and dread and violence and everything that we're seeing and experiencing inwardly and outwardly. So my teacher, Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest meditation master from northeast Thailand, always said this practice that we're doing is preparation for when very big things come. And whether they're big or small, the practice in some ways is always this moment. It's always just this much here. How do we apprehend this moment? What do we bring to this moment? And what is the potential in this moment to transform this experience of confusion and overwhelm and disassociation to really bring a deeper level of embodiment, healing, transformation, connection, opening, softening, contemplation, and having that inform our action and our relationship to within this relational field that we live, where we're all here really together in a way that in the last few decades we haven't experienced ourselves. You know, it's like everything is happening so fast and so quickly that where all the boundaries are dissolving so much. So in this process of this moment, there is this potential within this suffering to also look through the lens of the collective and see ourselves as part of an interbeingness within a wider, vaster, mysterious, living, speaking, conscious cosmology, where everything has consciousness, where everything is, in a way, a speaking world. We're not just a individual, remote and removed, as we felt ourselves to be from everything that's around us. And so that already is a beginning of a shift. Edward Edinger, who's a Jungian, who in his book, The Creation of Consciousness, talked about the breakdown of the essential myth of a civilization. When that starts to break down, is like the shattering of a vessel containing a precious essence. Fluid is spilled and drains away. And in that process, meaning becomes lost. And in its place, often very differentiated, this sense of separation appears. And instead of this sense of being in a unified field, we become more susceptible to emptiness and despair. So we're experiencing this moment, I think, where the myths of our civilization, the myths of our modernity, what the world has been built upon is in free fall, is shattering, and it's bringing a lot of confusion, lostness, break from reality, people acting out in the most extreme ways, become very susceptible. We're in an untrained mind. When there's fear, when that fear hits the mind, wedded into a separative consciousness, then we all become very susceptible to acting out in increasingly chaotic, violent, crazy ways. And I think we're very aware of that. So there's this moment where how do we respond? How do we find our own ground? Because in the Dharma practice, really the onus is, or the encouragement is, to always begin here with our being, to ground the practice here. And we can do that in a way that moves us from the separative consciousness into this inner sense of where everything is present for us and where we listen from a different place within our being. And that, in a way, is a much more, it's where everything is intimate to us. What we're listening to isn't something with someone or some situation we're thinking about as outside of ourselves, but we're listening from the heart. And there, when we're listening, even to the whole range of what's appearing within the field of the mind and heart, that level of deep listening allows for a sense of empathy and intimacy and interest. What is happening here? What is unfolding here? So one of the kings of the gods, whose name was Sakka, came to the Buddha and he asked a perennial question, perhaps one that we have that was completely irrelevant to this moment. Sakka asked the Buddha, why do the gods, humans, and all other kinds of beings who wish to live without hate, harming, and in peace end up hating and harming one another? And the Buddha tracks back with Sakka because of desire, because of liking and disliking, and so on and so on. And Sakka, each time the Buddha gives an answer, Sakka says, yes, but why that, why that, why that, until the Buddha gets to thinking, because of thinking. And then Sakka says, why thinking? And the Buddha used this word in the original language, prapanchasanya sankhara, which means basically it is that by which the mind, the original mind, this formless mind heart, this formless nature, if you like, our truer nature, timeless, formless, spaceless, inherent, luminous. It isn't taking, it doesn't, we don't know our home within this nature. So the mind looks for a home. It looks for a sense of where to find comfort, where to find a place to land. And so the Buddha points to this process where the mind solidifies around a view of me being this way, the world being that way. And from that place, in turn, there operates this sense and illusion of ownership. So once that starts to happen, then already we start to feel the experience of fear, grasping, holding on, and so on. So this is the wheel of suffering, the wheel of suffering. But in the wheel of this very core, this tiny, if you like, this tiny mark in the mind of me and I as being the most important, this tiny one little mark, it's from that propels this millennia of wars, these mountains of, the endless oceans of tears, as the Buddha talked about, that we've cried from grief, from loss, from pain, again and again, round and round. But in that contemplation, as we start to, as our teacher Ajahn Chah, the moment you start to come into relationship to this experience of suffering, of being lost, of being beleaguered, and start to contemplate it, steady the mind, steady the heart, and see this pattern arising, there's also a moment where that experience can condition the path of awakening. There is another way, as the Buddha said before his awakening, he said that there must be another way than going through these endless rounds of fear and grasping and separation and longing and loss. There must be another way back to our heart. There must be another way back to our deathless home, to this ground, this timeless ground of being. So this, the Buddha called this way, when the mind starts to turn back into its own nature and starts to contemplate into its own heart, into its intuitive nature. This the Buddha called, or one of our teachers called, the shift of lineage. You're changing lineage from the thinking mind that's separating out the world into the 10,000 things, into the heart, into awareness, if you like, where everything is inseparably resident. All is resident in this one immutable, seamless, timeless, deathless heart. And that nature of that heart is this listening, presence, illumination of whatever we're in touch with. And that shift, the Buddha called entering the stream of the Dharma, entering the stream of reality, the stream that will bring us home. And so for many of us, there is a taste of that, and then we know that we fall out of that and fall into despair and overwhelm. So the curriculum for us collectively, this is an inner work that we all do for ourselves. But what does this mean at this time when we have such a loss of, for want of a better word, a loss of soul, a loss of meaning, a loss of belonging, a loss of placement, a loss of belonging to each other, to the earth, to all other beings, to this beautiful, incredible potential of being here in this mystery, with awe, with compassion. It's all become very hard and dangerous, and catastrophic in so many ways. So there's this desperate and immediate and urgent need to reclaim, as the indigenous world knows, as the indigenous heart within us all knows, this reclamation of this deeply ensouled world. How do we find our way back? So in the Buddha's own utterances, his own sharing, one point he talked about this heart. He talked about this heart is already free. There's this line in one of the teachings that he gives where he's tracking this journey back into the fullness, into what he called the deathless heart, the full heart, the ever-present heart, the liberated heart. The line was Thanissara sabe Dhamma, which is a very important line in the teaching. Vimutti has this idea, means to be free, to be uncontained, to be liberated, vimutti. Vimutti sara. Sara means essence. Sabbe is all Dhamma. Dhamma in this way means not like the big Dharma, the timeless Dharma. It means Dharma, like everything is Dharma, everything that comes together and is constructed that will inevitably, dissolve, whether it's a thought form or an earth system or a cosmos. Vimutti sara sabe Dhamma. Everything is arising into form, to be known, to be touched, to be listened to be liberated, to be contemplated, but already in the essence of every moment, every circumstance, every situation, what the Buddha was pointing to is there is already freedom. At the essence of every circumstance, every moment, freedom, because this is the very nature of the heart. The heart is already free, is already luminous, is already boundless, is already seamless. It's just the turning back to that heart, the awakening the heart and deepening our faith to that heart, faith to and courage of this heart, to know that this heart is invincible, this diamond-like awareness. It's this very heart right now that can illuminate this moment. It's conscious, or what sometimes is called like the pure essence of consciousness, abiding within all beings. So this is, as the Buddha also said, was such a profound teacher, who also said we take the real to be unreal and the unreal to be real. It's not that the world passing and unfolding in our awareness and in everything that we're seeing internally and externally, it's not that it's unreal, but you could say it's dreamlike, it's ephemeral. It's you can't capture any of. We can't capture it. That's one of the illusions that we suffer under, that we can capture and hold and fight over and own, when in fact we don't own any of this in reality. We don't own the land. We put these names on it and then we have a war over it, but we don't own. No one owns. We're like dust kind of passing through. So what we take to be so real, that we slaughter over, that we fight over, that we become stressed over, that we try to hold on to, is actually, we miss the very real. What we take to be unreal, this very luminous right now, that's actually illuminating everything, your conscious awareness. This is the most real. This is what the Buddha called the amata Dhamma, the deathless heart, the deathless mind. This is the most real, and this is always forever calling us home, calling us back. So it's not that we have to go on a big search. So it's just a listening in. It's a sort of a slowing down and a listening in and paying attention. Where is the heart? What is really felt? How do we thread out through all of the reactivity till we begin to distill and start to really find the living, what again our teacher Ajahn Chah, such a profound teacher, talked about the living Dharma. that's always speaking, the living spirit, if you like. Don't have to put it in Buddhist terminology. It just happens to be a really great map. If you can get through some of the stuff that goes with these maps. But this living Dharma is really the essence of what ultimately guides. Whether, it's not the Dharma of the books, it's this listening of the heart. So Ajahn Chah would say, read the book of the heart, especially to us as Westerners. You read so many things, but don't read so many. Read your heart. Read the book to the heart. And it's here that the Buddha talked about the nature of the heart himself. He said this, to quote, "Formerly this heart of mine was confined, undeveloped, but now my heart is boundless, well-developed. Moreover, my heart was limited to a certain range, but now it's not confined. It goes beyond that range. It is freed from covetousness, freed from malevolence, not bewildered, but self-possessed and concentrated, possessed of loving kindness and friendliness, with compassion, goodness, happiness, joy, peace, and equanimity, radiating and pervading the whole world with a heart that is immeasurable, growing great and boundless, free from enmity and untroubled." So this already is our nature, and already at the same time we cultivate. So in the enormity of what we face at this time, when our hearts feel so subdued, where we can feel so exhausted, it's just hard to get out of the duvet every day. It's just like, what now? What's happening now?
Get out of the duvet.
Get from under the duvet.
Yeah.
Another day. Here we go.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to add something to just that really relates to one of the things that I think what you just gave to us all, which is around courage. I think I have told you this story, Thanissara, but it bears repeating here.
Yeah.
Because, coming from the Buddhist discriminating wisdom platform, shall we say, this comes directly from Neem Karoli Baba, who was sitting actually with Krishnadas one day in India in a hotel room in Mumbai. And Maharaji, as we called him, he used to come by there and give darshan and so on. And one day that was happening. Of course, he was with a translator who was a close devotee. And he looked at Krishnadas and he said, "Krishnadas, courage is a very important thing." And so Krishnadas was sort of taken aback, but the translators said then to Maharaji, "Well, wait a minute now. This is, bhakti yoga, Guru's grace. You will be showered and taken care of." Right? So you know what he did? He turned back to Krishnadas, and again he went, "Courage is a very important thing." And of course, Krishnadas had this for to this day, that he remembers that. So he's very fortunate that way. But that is such an important thing. It helps us to be able to assemble all of our practices, all of our perspective, to be able to manage the day to day. I mean, it's not just one big sartori that you're going to know your true self, right? So every day there is a momentum, and I think that the courage to stick with that momentum and remember the divine in that sense is extremely important. So this isn't coming from a Buddhist that, and the way he just dismissed that you don't need to take any action, which many people think that's the core of bhakti, right? You leave it to the guru, and how Maharaji expressed this in that moment, I think it is really important and good for us all to know. Jackie.
Yeah. Well, there is a sort of warrior piece in this too. Like when you think of Hanuman going into battle with Ravana to free Sita, it's like the Sita representing the captured soul, if you like, by the illusory world, and Hanuman being the breath of Ram, being the perfect servant of the Dharma, if you like. Perfect. And Hanuman forgets who he is and has to be reminded of all his powers. And it's like all the monkeys come and say, by the way, you've got these superpowers, and you can do this. You can leap across Lanka. You can tie up Ravana. Everyone's terrified of Ravana. Ravana's got all these powers. Like we see now in the world, we've got this completely Ravana. We're in the world of these horrific powers under the spell of demonic energies, And here we are feeling like a hobbit, like I'm in the middle of these swirling, overwhelming, like in Mordor, and feeling so powerless. But we have to be reminded, like Hanuman, we're not, we're not Hanuman, but we're in service of Hanuman, that this heart has enormous powers, actually. Power of love, the power of perseverance, the power of truth, the power of compassion, and we can apply these medicines, and and the power of the spirit. The one power that can never be defeated is the power of spirit, and that is the thing that has won through again and again in moments like this. There's no spiritual surrender. So as was said in Standing Rock by Chief Avu Looking Horse, so that, everything might be lost, but you can't lose that spirit. So I think, and also, again, Ajahn Chah, when he was asked, because he had a phenomenal, as he was a farm boy and entered the monastery at 13. And then by the end of his life, had 100 monasteries or so under his auspices. Asked, how did you do this? And he just said, I had the courage, I dared to do. I just dared to do it. None of us think we can do what we can do, but we can all do more than often than we think, especially when we're aligned in service, like that breath of Ram. We're here to be in service and to feel every day we wake up, what is our bit to do, And together then we're in that field together, that sort of field of whatever way that we're working to transform this mighty shadow that's descended.
Yeah. And that's what we're doing collectively here right now. And it's a great way to kick it off. Thank you so much, Thanissara.
That was part of one of the talks today, was about coming to the understanding of being part of this web of compassion. And I know that that's been a big part of my world lately, is just what you were saying of, getting quiet, what's mine to do today. And in a place where I am, as well as I think for so many others, often it can feel like there's so much to do. And the piece that keeps coming to me is this idea of that we tend to the part of the garden we can touch in that day. And I really love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Like, Mr. Mandela saying, who was a great inspiration for my partner and I. We worked many decades in post-apartheid South Africa. And one of the things he would say is, it seems impossible until it's done. These forces that seem to have so much power, they actually get more and more, like the apartheid system, more and more violent just before it fell, and then this other energy can break through. So it's the hope in that we are building what we can of this heart and this world that emerges from that heart, that can hold the human, hold the spiritual, hold the love for whatever is going to, really difficult times that we're in.
Yeah. So I think I'm looking at the time and noticing we have just a little over 10 minutes left. And so I want to make sure we open it up to live audience Q&A. So there's a few questions that have come in the chat. You're welcome to put more questions in the chat. And also, if you want to ask your question directly, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, there's a little thing that says reactions, and then you can raise your virtual hand. And then I'll ask you to unmute. But if you do ask a question that way, we do ask that you be succinct. There's a lot of us out here, and we want to make sure that we have enough time for as many questions as we can get to. And this isn't to limit you, but just to be mindful of the whole group. And as we're waiting for people to raise their hand or ask their questions, one of the things that's come up in the chat a lot during this conversation is where to learn more about these Buddhist teachings.
Well, the offering of the Dharma path is really available in so many shapes and forms. It depends. I think where to go next, I think it is a question of, again, listening to what comes your way and what you're drawn to. This thing, the teacher comes when you're ready, whatever guise that is like being receptive and inquiring and interesting. Like the thing I love about the question of Sakai is he didn't just stop. He keep going to look, keep inquiring and feeling what you're drawn to. But, really it's about at some point doing the inner work, whatever facilitates this inner work that we have to do. And I think once that begins, it starts to attract more support from the world around us. There's a ceremony around the Kuan Yin. Avalokiteshvara is a great being of compassion that says the way and the response are intertwined inconceivably. You make your devotion, you make your prayer, you do your practice, and the universe responds. So that's then the mystery of the path starts to unfold,
So well said. Yeah, I love that. I'm going to ask one quick question from the chat, which is from Karen, who says, is the Buddha heart different from our feelings? How do we know if I'm listening from the Buddha heart?
Yeah, this is just to try and, what is a big territory to make it. There's feeling, as feelings become less reactive and less caught in our, feeling is the conduit of intuition. So when it's purified more, when feeling nature, then it becomes pure intuition. So, we are another word for the knowing of the Buddhic means to know, and it's talking about the knowing of the heart. It's talking about a very different knowing than the mind thinking about things. So that knowing is the conduit of that knowing is the felt feeling. You feel it to be true. Someone's asked about soothing the nervous system. I would recommend doing what I do is in the morning, my partner and I listen to some really soothing music, lay down and do some very deep, slow breaths. I mean, there are sort of breath practices that are more dynamic, but even just taking the breath through your nervous system and breathing out. So it also opens up that liminal space where you can start to feel the intuitive sense, that guidance.
I'm going to get to David here in a second, but it reminds me, the intuitive part reminds me I always have a Ram Dass lecture that pops into my head around a lot of questions. And it was this idea of intuition, and that we think it's intuition and then we fall on our face. We realize it wasn't quite intuition, but that's okay. We get up and we do it again and we keep getting more and more refined that way. It's something like that.
I think that both work together, the discernment and the intuitive. So then their relationship, the thinking, the discerning and checking, and then there's a sort of alignment starts to happen.
Yeah, I love it. David, go ahead.
Thank you, Jackie. My heart goes out to you with all you're suffering through. So yeah, and thank you, Thanissara, for the Dharma talk. I just wanted to ask more about what you were saying in terms of this fall from grace, in which we, I don't know if it's think. For the first time, you mentioned trying to find a home or maybe a perspective, and that creates separation and fear. I guess my question is I don't want to, it's irrelevant, I suppose, as to why we do it. We do it. So get present and that this is a fact. But then what do we do about it? Because, I don't know. It seems like that's what's causing a lot of my suffering, thinking, and then the thoughts that it creates. I presume maybe going to the heart, but then I worry that all of the sort of collective suffering that seems to be going around, I will spiritually bypass it. So I don't know. I guess there's a lot there, but was really intrigued by that. And Saka, can you spell that so I can find the reference?
Yeah, a question. Saka, S-A-K-K-A, Saka's question to the Buddha. Yeah, I think sometimes when we don't really know, it's really that's when how practice to simplify is helpful. Like just you can get beleaguered by confusion, and how do we, and we're all susceptible to that. So like, I'm just gonna quietly sit and wait and breathe and do something simple. In this time when there's so much complexity and overwhelm, it's really important to come. That's when the monastic life I really appreciated. It was very renunciant and simple. And that's a real superpower. And then just you start to feel your way through some of these bigger questions that we're all struggling with. You're not on your own. We're all trying to figure out, how do we navigate this shite storm that we're all in, like it's unbelievable. But it is happening. So we need to tether ourselves to stay well. This is a long haul. It's not just this is it now. This is a curriculum we're now in. It's very fierce. But I believe we wouldn't be here if we weren't meant to be here to meet this moment, and all that it is. And a lot of it is being willing not to know. We don't really know, but I feel we'll be guided for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Kyle, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful Dharma talk. This has been really incredible. So my question for you is how do you personally balance the idea of how Ram Dass talks about the blood on the snow versus the icy Himalayan peaks, seeing the perfection of the plan, but also being very heart-centered, and really not trying to spiritually bypass the suffering, really being present for it. How do you personally navigate that?
Yeah, well, I don't particularly feel I do brilliantly well, to tell you the truth. It's one thing to talk about the Dharma, and it's a real another thing to try and embody all of this, So I fall into pitfalls all the time, from my old conditioning, but I get out of it quicker. That's one thing I've noticed after many years of practice. That's I sort of know, and it's a question of patience sometimes to get to know ourselves better. When is it I'm in an overwhelm, and maybe it is a time not to take on everything. Like Ajahn Chah said, don't pretend you've got a 10-wheeler truck when you've got a wheelbarrow. Sometimes it's today I don't even have a wheelbarrow. I might have a teacup, And so I'm going to, and other times there's to also think about we're not alone. The thing I feel like is really important this time is building community together, because none of us can manage this alone. It's way, way beyond. We need to have the spiritual communities actively building local as well as online spaces. That's something we're working at in our Sangha, to share, to work with teachings together, to get local, and that way, the collective mind is. I have trusted a lot now, rather than a leader's going to tell us what to do. It's I don't know. We're going to sit together and figure it out.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. It's I think a Thich Nhat Hanh quote, which is the next Buddha will be the Sangha. That's the next teacher.
He was on it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at our time, and I know we have some more questions, and so I'm going to invite you all to go to the community chat and be that Sangha, that satsang for each other. Please put your questions in there. And then everyone else, please go and tell us what you think. Share. That's how we learn from each other. And maybe you can bring it to tomorrow's gathering as well. We have another fabulous teacher, Anne Lamott's going to be with us tomorrow. It is pre-recorded. She is traveling tomorrow. And so, but we'll still have some live components for the Q&A. And she, as always, does a fabulous job. And Thanissara, it's just such a joy to sit with you. And I know all of us here wish that we had at least another hour, if not much more with you. It's been really...
I feel very touched that we can share this time, and grateful for this community, grateful for the extraordinary gift of Ram Dass and a timeless, eternal connection with Maharaji, which has been so profound. And that, that to hold faith, to hold courage, this courage, and to keep holding faith to the spirit and to each other, to the earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to compassion. It is a superpower, I think, really.
It is. And so needed for ourselves and for each other all of the time.
Yeah.
So thank you. So for those of you who are like, oh, this wasn't enough, please consider diving into the deeper dive. As I said, there's about 90 minutes of more content just on this topic alone, from Jack Kornfield and Omid Safid and Ram Dass and Joseph Goldstein. So you go to ramdass.org/courses if you want to dive deeper. Excuse me. Yeah. And we will see you tomorrow as we discuss, excuse me, polarization and divisiveness and a way through all of that. So thank you all. I know, right? Thank you all so much for being here. It is this is it. This is the satsang. This is the Sangha.
Thank you so much, Thanissara. That was so wonderful. Everybody for being here. On behalf of Love, Serve, Remember, this is what it's all about. So.
Indeed. Love, serve, remember.
Yeah, this is it.
Peace and love, everyone.
And just to answer in the chat, yes, same time, same Zoom link, weekday nights. For the next 2 weeks, we will see you here. And remember to invite your friends. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Take care.
Ram, ram.
Ram, ram.
Ram, ram.